Dear students, welcome to the tutorial on ILS administration. You know at the first hand that ILS administration is not a regular or repetitive job. In most of the cases, you need to do it after the installation of the software in your library. In most of the cases, that is one time job, but time to time you need to tune that particular different parameter settings to make the ILS installed ILS your library specific. Now, if we look into the code of the system administration job related to library automation, it can be framed into two groups. In the first group, you need to define different kind of parameters related to modules. Say for example, you want to start catalog module. Some of the configuration you need to select in the to start catalog module. Say you want to start acquisition module, then you need to define currency conversion table, you need to define budget, you need to define or you need to create member management, borrower categories, then some patrons you need to add into that particular categories. So these are the things you need to do after installation of the ILS, and the job can be divided into two groups. One is the parameter setting and another is the post installation configuration of the ILS to make it library specific. And please remember, only privileged user or super user can perform different ILS administrative job, including backup restoration, export import, this kind of administrative jobs. Now, in case of general parameters, you need to start with the date format. That is very important because in different countries different date formats are utilized. You need to decide what particular date format you need to follow and you need to define that. It is very important. You need to define it the very first moment what date format you are going to follow. Then you need to define the text parameters. Say in some of the cases you need to provide the GST tax or VAT. So that tax amount or percentage of tax you need to enter initially to start acquisition and budget process. Parameters for authorities, that what will be the separator for different subject descriptor you need to define. Default character encoding, if you are handling multilingual documents, you need to define that default character encoding must be based on Unicode. In most popular encoding standard is UTF-8. Then you need to select character encoding standard for the whole ILS or for a particular module. For the whole ILS, normally Unicode is the text encoding standard. Then you can select the themes related to OPAC, themes related to the staff interface. In most of the cases, ILS includes two interfaces. One is the staff interface or librarian interface, another is the OPAC interface or end user interface. And ILS may include n number of themes for both of the interfaces, and you can select one particular theme or you can change an existing theme into another one. Then the next important thing is the branch management. If you are running a group of libraries with independent branches and located in different places, you need to define what are the branches, what are their circulation rule, what are their item types, and the privileges to library staff who can handle different branch related activities. So these are the general parameters you need to take into account. Now, for example, you see the administration panel of an ILS. It is the Koha ILS. The Koha actually divided the whole administration process into two groups. The first group is the global system preferences, where we are defining parameters for different modules, and another one is the basic parameters, where we are defining different library related information, that is the branch, name of the library, type of the library, item types, authorized values related for generating different kind of pickup list, patron and circulation related information like patron categories, patron privileges. Then in the catalog module, we are basically giving or setting different kind of parameters related to default display format for retrieval of document, default data format. We can have options for mark, unimark, CCF or no mark even. Auto and manual barcode generation we can define here. We can on the option or we can off the option. We can provide filing rules here at the time of sorting of the bibliographic records. In the circulation module or circulation parameter, we need to define parameters related to maximum outstanding fine amount, maximum reservation allowed, patron image display, notification for borrower expiry, generation of gate pass, everything. Now, when we are going for the OPEC parameters, there are n number of parameters we will be discussing later on, but in the OPEC parameter, for example, you can define here what are the external resources you can link with your local library catalog or local library OPEC. So, you can handle it right from here in the ILS administration. Other library related parameters are defining library branches. It is option for setting library code, name, address. If you are running library automation system over a network or intranet, you can provide IP address, domain name, etc. Then next you need to define the library fronts, defining of the budget heads. Then under the budget head, different fund accounts you need to enter to handle budgets and library funds. Currency code and currency values you can give in the currency table to start acquisition module. Item types you need to set. Some of the default item types will be available with the ILS, but some of them may not be matching with your local collection. Some of the things you have, but ILS may not include that. So, sometimes you need to add something you need to delete, or something you need to modify in defining item types. Then patron group, you need to define the borrower categories with their privileges. Then issuing rules and circulation rule, it is very important that what are the user group can get how many books for how many days. This kind of things you need to define in circulation rule. Each of the library has their own circulation rule, and ILS provides a very systematic user friendly interface through which a library can define their circulation rules. Then different kind of authorized values for handling bibliographic format. We already talked about the pickup list for different mark tags. So, all the pickup list you can generate in ILS administration, and in the cataloging module you can use those authority lists to link with a particular tag. Then the bibliographic framework you can define here. Say for example, some of the default frameworks are available with you. So, default framework for books and serials, but your library is managing cartographic materials. So, here you need to define, or you need to create a bibliographic framework right from the ILS administration option. Then to make your retrieval much more efficient, you can define number of stop words here which will be excluded from indexing system. Then if your ILS includes the Z39.50 client gateway to fetch data from Z39.50 server, you need to enter different data sets related to Z39.50 server. You already know such kind of data set you can have from IRSpy service. The URL of the service is irspy.indexdata.com. Now, when your Z39.50 servers entering is over, you can set different kind of options related to export and import, the different kind of format, like your export import will be available in ISO 2709 format or MARC XML format. And last but the most important thing, you can generate a backup schedule for your the entire ILS database or the entire ILS system. Backup, regular backup and restoration of backup at the time of emergency is possibly the most important job of an ILS administrator. Now, here if we go for some kind of examples how we can handle ILS administration in a particular library automation system. In fact, I am giving example from Koha, but the process can be repeated in any ILS. Most of the ILS includes an exclusive module for administration. Sometimes they call it ILS administration, sometimes they call it system administration, or sometimes they call it simply administration. Now, as we know, that Koha actually divided the whole groups into two major blocks. One is the system parameter setting, another is the library parameter setting. It starts from the basic parameter. Now, within the basic parameter group, we need to define the groups, libraries, item types and authorized values. For example, let us start with defining a group. Now, what is a group? Group means, suppose you are working in a university library, there are n number of departmental libraries, seminal libraries, and there is one central library. So, you need to define how many types of libraries are available in your system, what are the main libraries, branch libraries, departmental libraries, seminal libraries, etc. Now, suppose in a college library there is only one library, so you define one category. So, first you start with the group defining group, then the moment group definition is over, you can start entering data for individual library. Say for example, we have defined here central library as a group and NVLI library as a branch under the central library. So, when this particular job is over, you can start in the following sequence. You need to define item types, authorized values, different parameters related to patron, different parameters related to catalog, etc. In this way, you can go on entering your library specific data or required data for start operation with your ILS. So, these are the parameters available under cataloging: MARC framework creation, Koha to MARC linking, MARC bibliographic framework testing, authority format tinkering, etc. In the acquisition parameter, we need to define currency, rates, then budgets and funds, and additional parameter like Z39.50 server. As I told you, you need to enter different data, say what is the name of the database, what is the port is in use, then what is the user ID and password if it is password protected Z39.50 server, what particular format you are interested, MARC 21 or US MARC or LC MARC or UK MARC or CCF, all are available and you need to enter that particular data. Now, if we come to the system preference setting or global preference setting, Koha actually listed different modules here. Say for example, I want to start acquisition module. So, different parameters related to acquisitions will be listed here, policy level parameters, administrative parameters, and we need to define the values against each and every parameter. So, default values are not quite sufficient for a library. A library need to define their own policies, own parameters related to each and every module: acquisition, administration, authorities, catalog, circulation, etc. Now, for example, if we go for the OPAC module only. So, you see here how you can handle OPAC. You can handle appearance of OPAC through this kind of parameters. Say for example, here it is a what is the biblio default value. By default it is given in simple format, but you can change the simple format into MARC format or ISBD format. So, the moment a user retrieve a particular record in the OPAC, the record will be displayed either in simple format or in MARC format or in ISBD format, but you are controlling it from here. Now, similarly, many other things you can control from here: name of your library, OPAC credits, base URL of your OPAC. You can create different kind of CSS style sheet and can link that style sheet into your OPAC to control the appearance. Then different other features related to OPAC, say maximum number of results against a particular query, OPAC authorities, whether you want to display authorities or not in the OPAC, you can allow or you can disallow. Then different kind of private browsing features, OPAC cloud formation, all kind of features you need to either on it or you can off it, and it will right from here the ILS administrator will control the appearance OPAC by setting these parameters. Similarly, you can allow suggestions, you can either on it or off it from here. Now, at the end, these are the, I hope you already understand that in this way you need to select a particular module and you need to go studying all kind of parameters associated with it, and initially you need to test how a particular parameter option is working, but within some trial and error process you will learn how a particular parameter works and you need to know what are the requirements for your library, and according to that you can set the parameters. But now we are going to cover the most important administrative job of a library ILS administrator, that is how to take backup. Most of the modern libraries are using automated backup script. That means you can create a cron job. Most of the library automation systems are based on Linux operating system. Linux is quite friendly with the cron job. Cron job means a chronological job which is repeated for a given time on a given date according to your requirement. So, you can define a cron job that every night 12 o'clock your whole database will be backed up automatically through MySQL dump command or PostgreSQL dump command. Now, this is one process, you can make the job of backup automatic, but some of the library professionals who are not quite habituated with handling cron jobs, they can take backup manually. There are n number of MySQL front ends are available, PHP MyAdmin, SQLiaq, etc. Now, here you see, here I want to take the entire ILS database backup. So, I have selected backup database, and there I need to go to the tools, and there it is the option is given SQL file dumping. The moment you select that particular option, it will ask you the name of the database and the location of the database, then it will backed up the entire ILS database into SQL format and it will place it. So, at the time of emergency, sometimes something happens, your hard disk crash or your data corrupted, you can use that backup file to restore the database, and this is a very important work of an ILS administrator. So, backup of database you can do with the cron job, or you can use many MySQL front end available, PHP MyAdmin, SQLiaq, etc. And please remember that to take backup and to restore dataset, you need not to be an expert in MySQL or any RDBMS. Through this simple to use user interfaces, you can take backup and you can restore databases at the time of emergency. So, in conclusion, we can say that ILS administration is a series of activities, but not repetitive in nature. At the very first instance, after installation of your ILS software, you need to create it once. Normally, it divided into two phases. First, you need to define the system parameters related to different modules. Then you need to set library specific parameters like name of the library, circulation rule related to the library, cataloging requirement of that library can be taken care through ILS administration. You can open up or close down different options through ILS administration, but possibly the most important task of ILS administration is to arrange regular backup. You made a good habit to take regular backup, and you also need to know how to restore data sets in case of emergency or in case of data loss. Thank you.